Okay. All right. Call the meeting to order, and we have roll call.
Yeah, Julie's still waiting. There, she's joined now. Okay. Britt,
Here.
Watson. And I can see he's there. He's just muted. Sorry. Okay. McCain is absent. Wertz,
Here.
Hyand,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Rest,
Here.
Hanfelder.
Chuck, you're muted.
Yes. Okay.
All right. We ready for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Sir President, are you taking over with your outline that you sent to all of us? You going to go with stop or start or expectations, or how are you going to do this?
Yeah, well, is there any, I guess, do we need to see if there is any public comment? I don't know if we need to.
Oh, yeah, I guess we need to do that, don't we? I'm sorry. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Sue, any public
Yes.
comments?
No public comments were submitted. You can ask if anybody has a public comment to make now.
Okay, anyone who's listening, do they want to make a public comment? And if so, you would be limited to 3 minutes. No public comments? Okay, Ken, Dr.
Okay.
Ken Traska.
Okay, well, first and foremost, welcome everyone. This is what I think may be the first of a number of board retreats, which is really about building a culture of alignment of expectations around myself and the work that I'll be doing with board members. And then also as a starting point, as we begin to explore the strategic future of Lewis and Clark. A big part of this, as kind of a context, is to really build upon the legacy that is Lewis and Clark. I mean, obviously, the college has been around 50 years, and there have been some remarkable advancements that have happened. I mean, just simply if we look around, but also in programs and also in partnerships, in how we've expanded. And so our work moving forward and how I've started to frame our vision moving forward is let's look at the next 50 years. And I think having a strong foundation, fundamentally a strong foundation of values, of alignment, of expectations, and then of directions. And so this is the beginning of that work. So with that said, what I've asked the board to do, each of you, is to answer some questions. And I've also asked these questions of our cabinet, our extended cabinet, and our faculty leadership team. Very similar questions will be going out to the full campus team as early as next week. And this is all to inform the resetting or refocus of our strategic plan moving forward. Even though one has been adopted from between 19 and 24, I feel it's really important that we revisit that we refocus that, and that we look at how it's grounded in data and how we're able to create some, what I call key performance indicators that will allow me to work very closely with each board member in measuring our success at any given point in time. Whether it's a question on finance, whether it's a question on enrollment, whether it's a question on partnerships, whether it's a specific question on a program's performance, that we're able to see somewhat in real time where we are in that moment and why we may not be meeting an expectation, why we hopefully may be exceeding an expectation. And if we're in either of those situations, what we're doing to either continue to exceed that expectation, or, hey, listen, we're not meeting a goal, we're a little bit short of where we thought we would be, but hey, here are the actions that we are taking in order to correct that lack of performance, so to speak, where we may be falling short, whether it's enrollment, whether it's pick anything. It's about being able to measure our progress. So in doing so, each board member has responded with their feedback that looks at what are their expectations of me as a president. And so I'm actually going to walk through each of these and just ask if there are any questions from you. And then also I've listed out a number of expectations that I have of the board. And really the exercise here is to see if we are on the same page or a completely different page. Hopefully we're on the same page. We all don't have to be at the center of that page, but at least being on the same page is saying, hey, we have some work to do, but these are the aligned expectations that we have of one another so that we can work collectively and constructively, and I think in a very meaningful way forward as we begin to advance the institution even further. And then beyond that, the next step would be to really explore the start, stop, and continue exercise, which I've asked the board to indulge. And that is really asking us, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we continue doing as an institution? I think there could be some very robust discussion around this in terms of why, where opportunities may lie, but ultimately this is to inform the refocus of our strategic plan going forward. We want to make sure that we're doing things that are in the best interest of our students always, that are best aligned with the community's expectation, and of course, best aligned with our overall stakeholder expectation, no matter what community we're serving. So with that being said, I'm going to go forward and first of all, ask if there are any questions at this point from any of the board members, and then begin to jump into the expectations and then see what discussion we want to have there. So any questions, concerns, thoughts, objections at this point in time? We're 7 minutes in. Okay, so let's start with the board's expectations of me, which, by the way, I felt were perfect. I think, I start this off by saying, as a president, I expect to hold myself accountable. And I expect the board and the collective team to hold me accountable. I believe in doing what I say and doing it wholeheartedly in the best way that I possibly can, leveraging the team around me. So here are the expectations the board has laid out for me as president. The first is to rebuild trust among board members and between board and faculty, board and staff. And so I can say that I agree with that expectation, and I believe the work here has already started. I am an all-team kind of focused person. We have our first all-team meeting that goes beyond the opening of the campus, which is coming up in November. I believe retreats and opportunities like this to have open discussion for each of you to be able to hear one another out, to be able to better understand where someone may be coming from with a perspective or even an attitude toward a certain decision is really a healthy way to move forward. But in terms of an expectation, I am all about building trust, sustaining trust, and broadening trust in the best way that we can. Any questions on that one that anyone wants to lend additional perspective to? But I think that's an important piece. I mean, what's on the list is the number one thing, but these are in no order of how they came in. They're just sort of mixed. But I think without trust, it's truly something that if we don't have it, things are going to be very difficult to move forward.
I agree. I think that it's already started when we tried to meet with faculty and staff before you came aboard, and I believe you have picked up the ball and you're running with it. So
Yep.
I think that's happening. I agree with you on that. Thank you.
Yep. And I would extend that by saying, an expectation I have of the board is to trust in my ability as a leader and trust in my track record, as a leader, and really being able to build bridges and to be able to grow organizations everywhere I've been. So I think that we're in alignment around the trust. Keep the entire board informed, but do not let the board micromanage the college. And, I think, for me, it's a matter of the board will always be aware of what's happening on campus, especially the bigger picture stuff. And this kind of circles back to the trust piece. As we reshape the strategic plan and as we ground that in very specific measurable goals and expectations, where at any point in time we can say, here's the benchmark as of January 1st, 2021. So if there was a question of where are we at today, we can see very clearly if we've grown, if we've moved in the right direction, or we're moving in the wrong direction. So we have a baseline to operate off of. I think that's a foundational piece of trust, because we're all looking at the same data. We're all looking at the same starting point. It's sort of like starting a race from the same starting line. We're not starting a mile ahead, a mile behind, or at a different location. We're all starting at the same point. I think in terms of, this is an expectation that came from board members, is don't allow the board to micromanage the college. I would agree with that. I think, that grounds itself in trust. I am, however, very much interested in the questions that the board members may have, in the curiosity that you may have in terms of what's happening, what's not happening, but also to circle back to the trust piece and allow the president and the collective team that we have put in place to lead the college. As I once joked with a colleague of mine, it's sort of like ordering a meal at a restaurant and then following the waiter into the kitchen to watch how the meal is being made. Have a request, but allow us to work in the kitchen of the organization, so to speak, to make things work and come together in the way that they should. The deliverables you'll see is when we have board meetings. Okay, here's where we're at. Here's where we're not at. What questions might you have? And if something, using sort of metaphorically speaking, the restaurant analogy is, if something doesn't look right or taste right or sound right, let us know and we will move toward repairing that and correcting it, or at least clarifying it with the board. So I think we're all on the same page there. The expectation is to manage the college. Absolutely. Manage and lead the college to be sure that we're serving students at the highest level, and quite frankly, that we're serving one another as a team at the highest level. So we're on the same page there. You run the college as president, and I would say that absolutely, that's an expectation that I'm glad to have seen on paper here, because I want to be empowered by the board as an expectation of mine to run the college. To do the work that you've hired me to do, which is to run the college and to do it at a very high level. Part of that.
Dr. Traska?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought you were done. How do you feel about the board members talking to employees?
Well, one of my expectations is boundaries. Now, I'm all about transparency. I'm completely okay with board members having a conversation with team members. I mean, I think it's also the way for you to keep your finger on the pulse of things. You could check in, hey, how's Dr. Traska doing? Hey, how is this coming along? But, at the same time, I would expect some boundaries around that. I think that can lead to an unhealthy relationship between president and board if there's too much of that going around. And also, quite frankly, if members of the team feel, well, I'm just going to go around Dr. Traska and the executive team and just go right to the board because I know they're going to listen, or I know that, it may happen quicker. I hope that the culture that we're beginning to create already is one where people know where quite frankly, where my heart is, where my personality is that I'm going to listen. I mean, I've always sort of had a very sort of crazy, in some cases, no door policy. So open up, let me know what's on your mind, talk openly, talk freely, and nothing is ever going to come back in a negative way to that person. I mean, if you have an issue with me or an issue with a process or a policy or a practice or anything, the only way to address those things head on is to hear them head on. So while I'm not going to limit anybody reaching out to board members or vice versa, I would ask to respect those channels of communication and try to come to the president first, come to members of the executive team first. Same thing with board members, come to me first and say, hey, listen, I kind of heard something out there. Could you look into this? Or, could you give me a little bit more clarification on what's happening here? Because I'm not quite sure. Let me do that part first. And then if it needs to go in another direction, it needs to go in another direction. But I'm not going to, sort of have no, I forbid that. I mean, it's not my place to forbid that. I mean, people can, in essence, kind of talk to whoever they want. But I think in terms of organizational development and progress, it's always nice to have those channels of communication which are consistent, because then that allows for consistent communication, consistent levels of trust to be built, and quite frankly, I think the integrity of that communication to be managed in a more formidable way. So long answer to a pretty simple question, but hopefully that gives you some thoughts on my perspective.
Well, right, I brought it up because, what's it been now? 9 months we've been operating, with interim presidents. And so we're all kind of used to just calling whomever we want, call Mary with a financial question or whatever. So I agree with you. We need to rethink that now and make sure you're always informed. Start with you, like you said. And then if we suggest or you suggest, let's get Mary involved and have a meeting together. But you should always be aware of anything that's being discussed with people. And and then we should not feel like people are trying to tell us information without you knowing,
Right.
So that shouldn't be going on either.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd always say if that's happening, then there's probably another issue of misalignment that's existing that we need to address. Because, an expectation I have is that people, I can't expect people to trust me. I have to earn that, but, to be open enough to be able to come to me and say, listen, hey, Dr. T or Ken or whatever, I have a problem with this and here's why. And then we can work through that together. There's nothing that I feel can ever come to me that I'm not going to hear in an honest, authentic way and address in an honest and authentic way. So, I think that's a big one. And I think to your point too, Julie, is, I think it was on here somewhere about surprises. Like I am not a fan of surprises, and I know the board is not a fan of surprises. The board doesn't want to be surprised that, hey, oh, by the way, this isn't working, or this fell apart, or we lost $1 million. Oh, by the way, no, it's, we know what's happening through our key performance indicators. And I think, just creating a culture where surprises are not part of the ingredient, where we're going to keep each other informed at the highest level at all times. And I think that comes back to the communication channels, that comes back to the trust piece, and it comes back to the respecting of roles piece as well. So
I would also hope that the employees would always feel comfortable talking to us, that they would not feel under pressure from you. Be careful what you say to Julie, or, that kind of thing. So I'm glad that we're past that. And, hopefully they'll feel comfortable coming up to us at a social event and talking to us without repercussions.
Absolutely. I 100% agree.
Good.
And so the regular reports of the board on what we need to know to make sound decisions. I think one of the expectations that I have had of myself is always probably on a bi-weekly basis. I may shoot out, and maybe more frequent than that. And this is something that I'd like to hear from the board on is really how often do you want to hear from me? In past experiences, I would typically give the board a written update on just sort of higher level operational things. Here's where we're at with this. Here are a couple of things in the pipeline that you should be aware of. Here's a general sense of what's happening on campus. But I don't want to overwhelm you with information. I don't want to overdo it. I want us to have a happy medium. So in regards to how you would expect that communication to happen, is there a specific in that? I know, on the list here is transparency, which is really coming up next. And I think transparency is about keeping those communication channels open and keeping things in front of you that you need to know. But how often do you want to hear from me? You expecting every Friday at noon to have, the president's weekly report, or are you looking at, hey, every couple of weeks, give us a Reader's Digest version of kind of, here is a snapshot. So Friday night for some leisurely reading, we can, see what's happening and be tuned into what's happening. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to be talking on and off. If something comes up, you just call me or whatever. But this is kind of collectively the board update on a bi-weekly basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis. I'd be interested in what the thought is around the table here, so to speak, the virtual table, of what your expectation would be there, so I'm not missing the boat on that. So you can all chime in or just kind of say, hey, whatever you feel, what do you think?
I'd say weekly.
Okay.
It would be my preference. And like, I wouldn't want somebody to come up to me at church and say, wow, I heard this happened on campus this week, or I heard that this is going to be happening at Lewis and Clark, and I not know.
Yeah.
I
understand.
But I don't want to overburden you either with, doing a beautiful newsletter every Friday or whatever. Maybe you do it on Saturday. We read it over the weekend. I don't care. But and then maybe we can see if weekly is too much. If you don't have enough to put in there, maybe bi-weekly is fine. But I like to know what's going on, because I don't want to have the burden of constantly asking what's going on.
Right. Okay. Anyone else have a preference on that, or I mean?
Weekly seems
I would say
quite a bit to me.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
that's fine with me.
All right.
Unless something comes up between that with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like an example of when they were, this computer system was hacked or whatever.
Right.
Lori sent out an immediate email, this happened today, or, we had, heaven forbid, carjacking on campus or something,
Right.
you would know when the board needs to know about something. Yeah.
Yeah, and those kind of things would be
To you guys, it's got to be significant to us.
Yeah, exactly. Because I also don't want, and when I'm looking at kind of the higher level operational stuff, that I think would be important for you to be aware of on more of a regular basis. And then as, issues come up or something that I think, hey, the board needs to be aware of. Yes, there was an issue on campus or an event occurred that we didn't expect. Hey, FYI, just so you're not hearing it out in the community first. So cool. All right. I think we're on the same page there, because I don't want to
Well,
not give you what you need,
go ahead.
feel informed. So,
Well, like you said, you met with community leaders or whatever. It would have been interesting to know, like, at the end of the week, you met with this person, this person, this person. It would just give us some idea what you've been doing, or, you had meetings on the high school, I can't think of what the term is, but, working with the superintendents or whatever. That kind of stuff, I think, would be interesting. You wouldn't have to put a detail of everything you did there, but just to know what you're working on.
oh yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly the way I would do it. So perfect. So we're on the same page. So that's good. I think, another one under Run the College is work with everyone in the community to build a positive view of the college. I think, that's obviously one that is an ongoing part of the work, and that's at the core of what I am. What I do. As one of the comments was, you are LCCC, and I think that is a great way to frame this, is whether we're on or off campus, in our day jobs here, or just as extensions of our own community, we represent the college, and need to always be advocates for the work we do, and always be looking at ways that we can improve and build those relationships and those links back into our community in strong ways. So I was very happy to see that, because that is really at the core of how I operate as a leader, is really always representing the best of Lewis and Clark and always looking at ways we can build on that. So transparency, and some of these I'm going to go through, even though they may be redundant to previous dialogue, but transparency, obviously. I think that's, not only happening with the board, but that's also something that I ground myself in as a leader to the entire team, of keeping everyone aware and tuned into what's happening. So they're aware, and there can be an opportunity for feedback or perspective back to me. I report to the board, and that's, obviously an expectation as well of mine, is that that there's that clear line of reporting and respect mutually, and that that we just continue to build that and grow on that together. This one kind of goes back to the updating the board, but dedicated and keep open and honest communication with with the board's concerns as well as the student bodies, and to do my best to satisfy the needs of both. You know, and I'll just, you know, kind of call it Ashtyn here, is that, you know, in talking with her and talking with our Phi Theta Kappa group, our student government association groups already, you know, a big part of our work, or the success of our work, is our ability to align with the expectations of our students. And the students will also be getting kind of a survey from me to really better understand where they are at. But already, you know, not to get in the weeds here, but already it's about process. It's about how do we simplify, you know, the access process, you know, whether it's to services, whether it's to programs, to allow the student experience not only to be more valuable, but to be more meaningful, and to be more structured in a way to where students feel that their experience on campus, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's going for financial aid or whether it's joining a club or whether it's, you know, getting some support services that they may need, is more of a 1-2 I'm in, rather than a 1-2 go to the left, go to the right, got to meet this person, got to meet that person. So I think to this point of the honesty of communications is that's part of it for me, is let me know what's working. Let me know what's not working, because then I can mobilize our resources on campus and have the discussions we need to have to be sure we're always improving what we're doing and not just grounded in this sort of status quo. Well, it seems to have always worked, or yeah, you hear from a couple of students and then things seem to be okay. In my opinion, whether we've heard it 100 times or one time, every one of those bits of feedback matter. And this goes to me saying that the honest and open communication and then acting on that communication to make the college better is really, really important. So I had that written down on my expectation list, is that well, sorry about that. That was a FaceTime call from my dad that I just declined. So just not sure what he wants, but I'll talk to him later. So, geez, apologize for that.
Maybe you better take that.
It'll be all right. He'll text me if it's something urgent.
We don't want you to get in trouble with your father. He may give you a weapon.
Yeah, you know, he worked for the government for all these years, so I got to watch out, you know. A couple of guys in sunglasses walk by here in a second. I'll let you all know. But, you know, but I think to the honesty of communication, it's got to be, let me know what's happening. And then those are the things that we need to really use to inform the changes that we need to make that are constructive to making the student experience better. Take the job very seriously in terms of active involvement. I think, you know, well, I mean, I would say that the measure of that's going to be, you know, in the help I'm going to need in that is probably not being overly engaged. I mean, I want to be involved in everything and anything I possibly can that will help us build a stronger brand, a stronger identity, and a stronger connection with our community and students and team collectively, period. So, you know, I think in terms of the expectation you have for me to be very involved, is one that I've always carried heavily on my shoulders personally, is to be involved and engaged and participate in the work wholeheartedly. So on the same page. Create an inclusive vision for the college and a strategic plan for achieving that vision. Absolutely, and I'll talk a little bit in a second here about really what that vision and broader sort of intent is of mine as we move forward. Review the job descriptions and performance of cabinet members to determine whether they meet the administrative skills needed for the college. You know, that's one that we're looking at collectively. I mean, one of the expectations is to take a hard look at organizational structure. the piece that matters here is that structure has to be aligned with direction and vision. So it's sort of like packing for vacation. If we're heading, going to Colorado, right, and we're going to go skiing, we're not going to pack as if we're going to the beach. So we have to make sure that we have the right people in the right seats to move the vision forward in the right direction. And so these are pieces that are really moving in alignment together. And that is a matter of assessing roles, assessing responsibilities, and being sure we have the right folks leading the way in each of these areas. And those processes do take time. So I think an expectation counter to that is allow us to take the time that we need to be sure that those alignment processes are in sync and are being done in a meaningful and very strategic way, and not a transactional way. Like, let's make that change, let's cut this, let's move that. But how does that fit into the bigger picture and momentum for the college? Stay above board with no politics pitting board members against one another. I think, an amen to that one. I think, I think we all have to respect our roles. We all have to respect really why we're here. I mean, as I've said more broadly, every decision we make, every move we make, every step we make, we have to remember that we're making a decision, we're taking a step, we're taking an action that is in the betterment for the student experience, period. And so if we can all say that what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're not doing, and what we're not saying is in the best interest of the student experience, in the best interest of growing the college, then I think we easily stay above board with other things getting in the way of us being able to make those decisions with our hearts and with what's in the best interest of our students. So I think we're in complete alignment there, and I will work very hard and diligently to be sure that we're always in alignment with that. And frankly, at times, if I need to remind any of us of that, I will do so, including myself. So I think we're good there. Stop the enrollment decline. Absolutely. I think this is where I had a little asterisk to point to my vision. And really the purpose of really all of this, and the vision is to broaden access for all students in all programs and services. And part of being able to do that is to be able to simplify processes and practices and procedures, and to really dig into policies. I mean, as the college evolves, so do the policies. So one way, in my opinion, to broaden enrollment, to build enrollment, is to broaden access. And as we talked a little bit about at the last board meeting, a big part of this is being able to take a really hard and somber look at the technology infrastructure of the institution and where we have the capacity to build upon that. Looking at such models as a blend flex model, looking at how do we dive into a competency-based education model in alignment with online or blended or hybrid formats, really about meeting students where they're at. The other part of that is balancing it against the face-to-face teaching and learning that we need to continue, because every single student doesn't necessarily align with the technology piece. So growing enrollment is, and this is pushing back on what you may hear out in the real world, right, is we can't be all things to all people. And I always say, as community colleges, we have to be all things to all people. We have to be able to exercise the agility that we've been entrusted with through our fundamental vision, is to serve the community, serve our students, and to be able to meet them where they're at in their experience, where they're at their point in life, and to help them continue to move forward. So I think part of stopping the enrollment decline is getting our arms around the access piece, and where do we have opportunities for access. Rural communities, how are we accessing our rural high schools? Whether that is, Bunker Hill, right? Whether that's Macoupin County, whether that's, any one of our counties that have limited access back to our college, how are we creating access for them? Through technology infrastructure, for one, or B, through just having a conversation by saying, where are we missing the boat? Where are some opportunities that we have to better serve you? And that part of it as well will be part of a more of a robust enrollment management plan that I think needs to very carefully align with the strategic directions of the institution. Ensure that students are prepared for jobs of the future and jobs in our area. I think, you know, part of the alignment there is being sure that our programs are being informed by industry, and that our programs are informing industry by saying, here's the equipment we have, here are the vulnerabilities that we're facing. You know, what is it that you need? And they're asking us the same questions. What is it that you need? What is it that we can do to help you? And what is it that we can do to help you, going both ways? Be sure there's alignment there so that when students graduate, they're able to move into gainful employment that are in high wage, high demand areas that allow them to continue an upward mobility in their lives. And that's going to require a very hard look at program review and feasibility processes, and also our process for new program development, which we also talked a little bit about at the first board meeting. Understanding that programs sometimes can take up to a year and a half to develop. We have a lot of programs on our campus which have the ability and capacity to grow, where we could have spin-off certificates or other opportunities to reframe those programs, so we may not have to always start from scratch. So I think part of enrollment growth is evaluating at a very core level what's happening and what's not happening within programs, and what really needs to start happening, you know, in our programs and services to allow that access to be broadened. So that's kind of my perspective on enrollment decline and how we need to handle that. Question the status quo. There won't be a day that I don't question the status quo. I mean, you know, it's probably my biggest pet peeve. Well, we've always done it this way, so let's keep doing it. It's just, those are the few words that aren't in my vocabulary. It's like, how do we do it better? You know, how do we push ourselves to make this place the best it can be? Oh, and by the way, when we do become the best, then it's a matter of how do we become better. And you've all heard this in even the welcome video I did. I believe in that wholeheartedly. That is my personal and core value, is that always get better, you know, no matter what. So status quo, never going to happen. I mean, just, and by the way, if there are things that we're missing by saying, well, you know, yeah, that seems to have been working well, I'm going to continue to empower our team to keep looking at ways to make it better, to keep looking at ways to tweak it, to keep looking at ways to allow it to become an even stronger highlight for the college, rather than just something that we've always done well. I think that's really important. And let me just jump a bit ahead here. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity with some of our external partnerships and some of the external locations that we have in our communities to do just that very thing. You know, we're out there, we're in communities, but how are we able to broaden access in those communities through those locations, whether, and we talk about this a little bit later, whether it's our Scott Bibb Center, whether it's Carlinville, whether it's Jerseyville, whether it's East St. Louis, whether it's the Nelson campus. It doesn't matter, you know, those exist. What are the opportunities embedded within those organizational extensions right now? I think that's really important as well in terms of status quo. Additional borrowing is highly unlikely. I think that's off the table. I think we need to be creative. I think we need to look, going back to the enrollment piece. Enrollment is a big part of our revenue. I think Julie may have mentioned it a little bit earlier, but looking at high school partnerships theoretically doesn't really bring in revenue. It brings in headcount. And if we've looked recently at the enrollment charts, we have traditional enrollment doing this, high school enrollment doing this. It's almost at an intersection, which is concerning, you know. So we have opportunities there to rebrand high school partnerships, to maybe frame it around an early college concept, and to get students on our campus at some level during that experience to truly experience the college experience, that is Lewis and Clark's experience. So that's really, really important that we look at those things, so we're not leaning on this, well, gosh, we need to borrow money, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. We need to find ways to bring more dollars into the institution without borrowing. And, I've never been a fan of borrowing. I'm not a fan of owing people anything personally. So I'm not going to do that as a leader. Say, well, let's just, do it this way because it's easier. I think we need to be strategic and thoughtful in how we're going to invest in the future of the institution. And that's just important for us to embrace. And that means, putting it out there that yes, change is going to happen. We're going to have to make hard decisions. And that is part of also addressing the point, a couple of points earlier, status quo. Work closely with the foundation and make joint calls on possible donors. Already working very closely with the foundation board. I've met with almost all foundation board members, at least most of them, several donors already, foundation leadership, and the alignment exercise, so to speak, is in high gear, and already looking at ways to continue building the foundation in the spirit of looking at the next 50 years. And how do we build the value of the foundation and align the foundation's purpose and focus with the expectations of the college? Where are there opportunities for us to invest through philanthropy in building the college momentum going forward? I mean, that's got to be it. And I'll tell you, as community colleges collectively, we're so behind the 8 ball on this in terms of fundraising, in terms of building endowments to better align and be able to sustain some of the work that we want to do. Ensure resources are in line with enrollment and appropriate changes are needed. I think as we build the strategic plan and develop the measurable goals and aspirations, that's got to be very tightly linked to our budget process. So we can't say, well, we're going to do this. And the question I would have if I was on another side of this, say, well, how are we going to pay for that? So everything we do has to have a direct link to our budget and be able to be sustainable. Otherwise, as a good friend of mine once said, vision without budget is hallucination, right? I mean, we can imagine all the best things we're going to do, but if we don't have a budget, we don't have a plan, let's just all sit around a circle and hallucinate about all the great things that we could do. But if we can't pay for it, it's a good idea, but how are we going to get it done? So I think the budget's got to be fundamentally aligned with our directions that are grounded in very, very data-driven benchmarks. That's how we measure it. And budget's got to be a variable. So we're in alignment there 100%. Dispose of non-student focused assets. That's one that I'm interested in digging in a bit with. I've highlighted that one. An expectation I have is that we do everything in the best interest of the student. So when I read that one, I'm interested in the collective discussion of non-student focused assets. So are these properties, are these programs? I mean, are there things on the board's radar that I need to be aware of that aren't making sense to you? So that, for example, I'm not going in this direction and the expectation of the board is that I should be moving in this direction rather than what is the sort of alignment piece on this. So I'm going to throw that out there and pause for a second because I had a point here to say, what does the board mean by this? That's my question. And it could be anyone. I don't know who wrote that comment, actually. These are all just on one sheet of paper, so anybody can say that.
A possible example to that would seem to me to be the Manning Jackson Center.
Okay.
College borrowed money and spent $4 million on, and I don't see that as being a much, if any, value to our students. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd like to hear it if I am.
Right.
I had talked about juggling things also on some of my comments, even with the Nelson campus. I agree with Kevin about the Lincoln School. It seems to be of no value to the school or the community because it's not being used. But the Nelson campus, Edwardsville High School is using one building. We're using one building for the College Forever, which I like. But, you know, if Edwardsville School District might be interested, or we thought we didn't need the N.O. Nelson campus. Again, these are just, you know, just throwing ideas out.
Yep. Yep.
What if Edwardsville came along, school district said, boy, we'd like to have the whole campus. We could move our College for Life maybe to the Gibbs Center, because it seems that's certainly underutilized. You know, it'd be nice to sell that. I would like to see all our programs brought back to the Godfrey campus and centralize it right there. That's what I'd like to see, but maybe it's not feasible. You know, again, like as you said a while ago, we have all these wonderful ideas, but how are we going to pay for them, or how are we going to put them together? Right. So, you know, it's just, that's always been on my mind. The Nelson campus, the Lincoln School, the Gibbs Center. Does that really work well with what we're to do at the Godfrey campus? And I think somebody, one of the board members mentioned even the building in Carlinville. Are we utilizing that? Well, I know why it was built. It was a political deal, but you know, are we really utilizing that? It seems to me that if we need room there, it'd be more feasible to rent space in Carlinville, because there are a lot of empty buildings, but we have the building. So anyhow, these are a lot of balls in the air that I would hope that we'd evaluate and see, as you said earlier, what's best for the students, the taxpayers, you know, the college itself. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I have a comment on that too. I don't necessarily agree that we shouldn't have a presence in all these communities. I like the fact that, you know, we have our name on signs, you know, in the middle of Edwardsville. I think that has some value. But in Jerseyville, for example, we rent some space there. So with that gets us out of a lot of costs of owning a building there and maintaining it. And, you know, like I was talking about the cleaning fees and the landscaping and all that. And I remember when I was young, and I lived in a little town I grew up in Nokomis, Illinois, which is about an hour from here. And we were served by Lincoln Land Community College. And they had evening classes at our high school. And to me, that always just made a lot of sense. And I went to classes there, and the room would be full of people because the community college was an hour away. And it just made a lot of sense for people to go to the high school and take a college class in a room there. And I think that was the best of both worlds. And, you know, Lincoln Land didn't have to own a building in my little town and so forth. So I like that model. But yeah, I think that although some of these things like buildings we own or whatever, all these initiatives look great, like we're part of the community. But to me, it's caused the dilution of our efforts and keeping us from focusing solely on serving students. I mean, NGREC is a wonderful place, but I struggle to see how that really benefits many students. I know it benefits some, and it definitely benefits the community. It's a wonderful place, and, you know, it was a wonderful initiative, but that's just an example so, you know, that takes HR people to watch over what all those people are doing there and so forth. And it is pretty much self-funded, so you could justify it that way. But that would be an example of, you know, like, how did that really help my son when he was in high school, or, you know, thinking about going to Lewis and Clark? He didn't have any interest in that. So just brainstorming a little bit. That's my comment.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, that makes sense. Anyone else on that point?
I think if you consider leaving or removing yourself from the N.L. Nelson facility, you're going to have a lot of people in that area up there very upset with Lewis and Clark College.
Yeah.
In what way, Dwight?
that is, they pay their paid taxes, and that is facilities used for a lot of other functions for that community. I know a lot of times that facility is rented out for all kinds of functions over there, and it's a great meeting place for those people over there. And I think that the Edgersville residents would be very up in arms about it.
I guess maybe I misunderstood. I don't think that we would, gosh, I mean, like Claire Room is a great place, for example. I have been there quite a number of times. And so I would hope that they wouldn't, whatever happened to those bricks and mortar would, well, they would still be there and they'd still be utilized by the community.
I had a chance to meet with Dr. Patton, mayor of Edwardsville, and we're going to have a meeting, him, myself, and Dr. Henderson, who's the new superintendent of schools in Edwardsville, to really talk more broadly about the college's presence there and the value it's bringing to the community. And, you know, I think as I read in some later feedback we'll get into around start, stop, and continue, but, you know, one of the observations I've made in the 20 days that I've been here so far is the opportunity that exists to connect the interconnectedness between our locations. You know, they're all sort of operating out there and doing what they do, but there's no interconnectedness between them. And then also the connectedness back to the main campus. But one of the things I have observed, you know, which again is the fine line here, is the perceived value that those locations are bringing to the community, from the community's perspective, you know, from the leaders' perspectives in those communities. And the discussion has been more around how can we build upon that? How can we provide more opportunity for students in communities like Edwardsville or Jerseyville, who may not be able to get to the Lewis and Clark campus, but want to take advantage of the programs and services and opportunities that the college provides. For me, at a very core level, this circles back to what I've always believed in needs to be core to our purpose here is access. And, you know, I mean, I get the fine line there between, you know, Lewis and Clark Community College is in Godfrey, Illinois, but we are the community's college. And being in neighborhoods and in communities where services may be limited, where access may be limited, I think at some level, now we do have to evaluate cost. I think that is absolutely an imperative, and that's not what I'm getting at. But I think we need to do an analysis of what's happening in these places, what's not happening in these places, what could be happening, and then assessing, okay, for the things that could be happening, do we have the capacity to allow them to happen, to invest in what we need to invest in to make them happen? But I really feel, and this is going to be the work, right? This is going to be the work ahead is how are those external locations that are tucked away in communities across our district, providing value through access to Lewis and Clark Community College's programs and services. If we can agree that that is happening, then I think there is discussion to be had in how we continue building that. If we agree that, well, it's sort of happening, but really not in the way that we think it should, and we really don't think it can continue, then we need to have that discussion on how we pull back. But, you know, again, the purpose of today's retreat is really to get our arms around some of these bigger picture pieces, and then as we move forward to be able to focus more on strategy around what we need to do, why we need to do it, and when we're going to do it. Because I do think that, at least from what I'm hearing and seeing so far, and again, it's somewhat premature for me to say this because it's only been, you know, a month, I suppose, is that there is a connection that these communities feel to the college because of our presence, you know, and certainly we don't want to disrupt that. I think if anything, we want to build on that, but we have to be responsible with, you know, how much more money do we need to put into these operations, or where could we pull back on some of these operations but still meet the needs and expectations of those communities? So.
And Dr. Trask, I think what you're saying, we went earlier back here, you talked about stop the enrollment decline. You want to stop the enrollment decline. You want to make it more, turn around and increase the enrollment. But in the next breath, you're wanting to be less availability, accessible.
Right.
So we're going to bring all these things back to Godfrey and make it harder for a student to get to. You're going to kill it's not going to help your enrollment. There's people over there that maybe don't have a car.
Yep.
They can't get to Godfrey. They can't, Jerseyville, Macoupin County. And we need to make it more accessible, not less accessible. So by closing buildings and pulling back into Godfrey is counterproductive.
Yep. I would agree 100%. I think we need to take a hard look. I mean, as I've gone out, I've seen the opportunities to grow and expand, in every one of them. And I think we need to have a true and honest discussion around this idea if we want to broaden access and allow students to take advantage of the services and programs we offer, sort of this neighborhood college concept, which ultimately is how I see these sites, is this is an extension of our community here in Godfrey, our neighborhood, so to speak, and we're moving into these other areas and building upon these other areas to continue to broaden access. I think what we may have to look at least what the sentiments that I'm hearing is that we need to look at the operational viability of some aspects of those partnerships. I would hope the last thing we do is just go out and just say we're going to close 3 things without thinking about how that would in fact limit access.
Well, I like Julie's comment about, and I agree, I did the same thing when I was going to college, to take classes at a local high school through either Lewis and Clark or somebody, and so without spending lots of money, you're renting classroom space at Greene County, which is, in my opinion, been ignored. A lot of Jersey County has been ignored. Calhoun County has been ignored. A lot of Macoupin County has been ignored. What I was suggesting was that if you come back to the Godfrey campus, but I like Julie's idea of renting space at the various high schools so that people who live in Hardin in Calhoun County, right there they go. They could walk to school, offer it that way, Again, these are, I'm glad to hear all these ideas, there are a lot of things to be discussed and evaluated.
Any other thoughts on this one? But thank you.
I just want to say that, maybe you reach different people too when you're going out to the high schools and having evening classes out there. Going back to my example, I remember there being, middle-aged housewives in there at that time. That's what they were called, who weren't going for a degree or whatever, but they wanted to take a psychology course and just expand their view. And in a small town like that, it's really hard to do. And then I wonder too, could you get the high school students to take their classes that way instead of, having them take a high school course taught by a high school teacher? Maybe they go to, do real college, and go to a college course in the evening. I don't know. I don't know a lot about this, but those are just some ideas to think about. And I agree. I think we should keep the presence in the communities, but maybe we can just do it in a smarter way. Maybe we sell a building and then commit to a lease that rents, a fourth of it back. Because that's the way a lot of times you could sell a property. If you sign a lease that said, we'll rent this property to make it viable for you, we'll rent it commit to renting it for the next 10 years or something like that. So that gets the debt and the asset off our books, but then we still have a presence in the community. We still have our sign up saying, here's where here's where Lewis and Clark is in town. And so.
Sounds good. And the reduced non-student focused activities, I had kind of coupled in with that one, but is there any clarification on that one, that because that was an expectation that I reduce non-student focused activities. I mean, are there activities that have occurred historically that have been non-student focused, or are there things that I'm needing to put on my radar? Just clarification on that one as well.
Yeah, I
If-
read that and I wondered what it meant.
Yeah, that's what I was at. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think if anything, an expectation I have is that everything we do is student centered. I mean, we shouldn't, if we're making a decision and we don't ask the question, how does this affect the student, then we're not making a good decision. I mean, at least I haven't noticed anything that we're doing that doesn't center on the student at this point. I mean, I think, like everything, I mean, we're doing good work all around, and there's obviously opportunities for us to build on that and make it better, but that's inherent in everything any of us does on a daily basis. Okay. Remember, the taxpayer is a very important stakeholder. Absolutely. We're all taxpayers, and I agree that, we'll be mindful of that. And I think that circles back to really not borrowing more money and looking at ways in which we can refine what we're currently doing and build upon what we're currently doing. So I don't see that as an expectation that I'm not aligned with. The dashboard for the Board of Trustees, so that we know what's going on and we're going in the right direction, that's something I agree with. I think, in past experiences, I've always had kind of a dashboard, and these are grounded in what I call those key performance indicators. So as a board member, here are the 5 directions the college is focused on. Here are the key goals and aspirations that are grounded in some benchmarks. And on a monthly basis, once that's established, the board will be getting, basically, they would see a dashboard that says, here's how we're performing across the board. And I think that's really important. So and that's going to take some time to work through, because part of that is making sure that we understand the expectations of each of you and what you want to see in that. And I can say that, for example, on the financial reporting piece, Mary and I have already talked quite a bit since the last board meeting. We've already explored some different ways of looking at our financial reporting to better align with maybe what the board is expecting to see there, so that there's a better finger on the pulse of where we're at, why we're at where we're at, and why we may or may not be meeting expectations. So I think we're on the same page there. Succession plan for NGREC leadership. I met with NGREC last Friday actually now, and I know that is something that's in the works with Gary and others. So I, keep the board informed of what's happening at that level, unless there's other questions or concerns with that one. The high school partnership, Yvette, myself, Brett, and others have already started meeting on this one. I would like to see a complete reset on high school partnerships, from looking at it through maybe an early college model, how we can generate revenue and how we can grow those enrollments even more. Part of the concern there is obviously it's a little bit political, because high school enrollment dual credit are free. It's essentially free. We do get an appropriation for that, but that is, as far as I understand from Mary, somewhat erratic in what we get and when we get it. So there's some work that needs to be done there. So we're looking at rebranding high school partnership and looking at ways of actually getting those students even on the Lewis and Clark campus at some level, so they can engage in the student experience. And it also allows us to utilize the resources we have in our faculty and other resources on campus for those students. So that's something that's already beginning to take shape through conversations and planning. So I was happy to see that one on there as well. Be ready to make hard decisions in a world for all of us. And I mean, And my expectation there was be ready for some hard decisions and some hard choices. And for me to challenge each of you as board members, I think to make tough decisions because, I think to Dwight's perspective, all I really want to do is broaden access and grow the college in ways that make every one of us proud. And doing that in a way that's collaborative and inclusive and making sure that we are serving every possible community that we can in the most viable and reasonable way. I mean, the last thing I want to do is have someone I meet by chance to say, you know what, I really like Lewis and Clark, but I'm unable to go because I live in a community that doesn't have access, or I never hear from the college, or whatever the issue may be. We have to keep our finger on the pulse of the communities that we serve and make sure that we're doing right by them every day. And that's going to require decisions, and that's going to require strategy, and that's going to require a level of mindfulness to why we're doing what we're doing all the time. And that is to be better and better and better at serving students and communities each day. So I think on those expectations, the piece for me is to reinforce is that I'm aligned with those. I think the next exercise in our work together is making sure that we're able to have that open, honest conversation when it needs to happen on how and where and why and when these things are taking place. And that means that as decisions start to come to you, that we're always reminding each other that we're making decisions that have been thoroughly vetted, that have been thoroughly discussed, and that are in the best interest of moving the institution forward. So with that being said, and then I think we'll take a little bit of a break, if that's okay. One of the expectations I wrote down in the spirit of what I just said is I expect the board to ask questions. The last thing I want to do is be moving things forward and never hear from the board, just like you don't not ever want to hear from me, you want to hear from me. So ask the questions that are coming up in your mind. Ask the questions that perhaps others are asking you to ask, so that we are always informing our decisions with the best information, with the best decision-making structure, that we're not bringing things forward that we didn't hear everyone's voice, or at least have the opportunity to hear everyone's voice because we didn't get the question. The other expectation that I have, and I'm interested in where the board is on this one, is to be open to continued development as a board and alignment training, and that goes to one of your expectations of me, which is stay above board with no politics pitting board members against one another. And I think part of that is being open to developing as a team, as a board team together over time. Having this retreat today is really an introduction to process together, to us coming together and getting on the same page as a starting point. So in other words, we're starting this race at the same point. But it's got to be an ongoing transformational experience. It's got to be something that, hey, as a board, we feel it's really important for us to come together from time to time and build the trust that we need to build with one another in order to make the most sound, meaningful decisions for our students. So that's the one that I wanted to bring up, that I felt I put a little highlight aligned with the stay above board with no politics pitting board members against one another, is that we're all doing this because we care about Lewis and Clark Community College, we care about our community, and we care about serving our students. And I think if those three principles drive what we do every day, then there's probably never ever going to be an issue. And so being open to continued development and alignment training is important to me as president. So I know that each of you are exposed to continuing to become better board members and a better team collectively. So it's building on the good work you're already doing together. I think that's really important. So.
Yeah,
there any
I'd like
thought
to say,
on that one? Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
I think this model of governance works,
Yeah.
if everybody plays their role properly. So we're all, representing different parts of the community. We're representing taxpayers or business people or, so forth, or high school students or whatever. And your role is to help us run this or to run it, and we supplement that with our information. So I think the model, the way this is all set up, should work great as long as we all, do what we're supposed to do.
Good. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions on that one? And I think, are we able to take a break, maybe a 10-minute stretch break, if you guys are okay with that? And then we'll come back in, and the next item on the list is to review and discuss the feedback from the start, stop, and continue exercise. And really, I'm going to, and by design, we've kind of talked about some of that in the expectations, but I have some questions on some of these, and I want to just begin to have a discussion on them with you, get some feedback from you. And again, the purpose of that exercise is to begin to help myself and the exec team and the collective campus inform that recentering of our strategic plan. What are we going to focus on? What aren't we going to focus on? And then begin to move in focusing on those things we need to focus on. So if there aren't any other questions at this point, if maybe we could take a 10-minute break, be back here about 20 after 2, and then we'll kind of hustle forward from there. So.
Excuse me, I apologize. I had to step out for a minute, and I was wondering if you talked about one of the points that I brought up in my feedback to you was that ensure that students are prepared for the jobs of the future and the jobs in our area. Did you touch on that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And I think, going back to that one, sir, I think the the points I made were how, and this came back to our program development and program review processes to make sure our programs are aligned with what the workforce and what business and industry is expecting. And I think we have some opportunity to improve in that area based upon the feedback I've received from others as well. So, we want students to be able to move into high wage, high demand areas, to have gainful employment once they graduate. And I will tell you that a lot of times I'll hear the question from folks, okay, so how many graduates and do they all get jobs? And, and the answer has been, especially in nursing and dental assisting and welding, has been yes, yes, yes. So I think part of it is to make sure that that's replicated across all of our programs, and where it's not, back to the spirit of alignment. Where are we not aligned with industry? Where are there opportunities for us to refine a program? It may be that we don't have the right equipment. So a student graduates, they go to interview for a job, and the company's like, well, okay, but you were trained on the XL1 model. We're on XL5. So that means that advisory group needs to help us. We need to be reaching out to those companies and saying, hey, listen, we need some help. We want to be able to train and prepare the generation of workforce you need, but we need some help with equipment, or we need some help refining our curriculum to be sure that we're doing what you expect. That's absolutely imperative, sir, with what we do. So that's right in line. And it goes back to even growing the enrollment. And we're not going to get enrollments in programs if students aren't getting jobs from those programs. So it's a connect the dots kind of thing. Well, why would I get into that program when 1% of the individuals get jobs, So we need to make sure that the program, and this goes back to that program review piece, is, are the programs performing? Are they creating outcomes, meaning graduates that are getting jobs on a consistent basis? The wonderful thing about community colleges is our agility. We can adjust and manipulate programs to meet those needs. We should be able to do that in a pretty timely way. So, so that's a challenge for us to continue doing, and we're going to start taking a harder look at programs and program review to make sure that we're improving programs and that programs are always aligned with what the expectations are on the workforce, so students are getting jobs right out of the gate. So hopefully that answers the question. But yes to that one. So let's take 10 minutes, 2:24 now. If that's okay, we'll see you back then. Thank you all. Okay, welcome back. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'll go ahead and get started since it is 2:25. Next item on the retreat agenda is to review and discuss feedback around the start, stop, and continue exercise. This is also an element that I've, for those listening in, that I've asked the board to consider and received some really good feedback. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk through these. I'll start with the start list, which is the longest list, and then move into the stop list, and then the continue doing list. And again, as I've said before, really the purpose of this exercise is to gather feedback really from everyone. And I've started with the board and the cabinet and faculty leadership to really get a sense of really what's happening on campus, from the perspectives of those individuals, what we really need to start doing, you know. And this isn't in any way, shape, or form a criticism. I think this is where we've all had the opportunity to see what opportunities are ahead of us. And then there are some things that we may need to stop doing. These are things that, you know, from our vantage point, it could help us in building new opportunities with the college if we kind of step back a little bit. And then there's some things that, hey, here's some things that we feel we should continue to do because we're doing them really well. And as I said in my last, sort of the last agenda point was betterment, right? Even though we're continuing to do things, what can we do better in those things? So without further ado, let me walk us through what feedback I've received here. Start with this context that really we are all Lewis and Clark Community College. I am Lewis and Clark Community College, and this feedback came from a board member, and I was so delighted to see this because for me, we are always an extension of our roles on campus. We are, when we're in the community, we represent Lewis and Clark, and you know, for me, what I really connected with on this point was the fact that, you know, this is about a team. This is about building a team of teams that are always focused on the best interests of the institution. So that's something that I think has already started and something that I am completely aligned with in terms of continuing to build and grow as we move forward together. We should review every program, every dollar spent with the question, is this serving the needs of our customer, the student, the community, and the taxpayer in the best way possible? I think right on target. I think, you know, this is the the focus that we have to take. Everybody is investing in Lewis and Clark in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's a student paying tuition, whether it's a taxpayer paying tax, whether it's somebody coming to campus for an event, whether it's somebody driving through campus, walking through campus. So we need to make sure that the value that we're giving back to those individuals is at the utmost level, that it is the most, how do I want to say this? That it is a value that everyone can respect, to say, you know what, I'm getting what I expect from the institution. Should we we should rein in spending so that we do not have to issue bonds to pay operating expenses. I mean, I think this goes back to an expectation that really we need to start looking at ways in which we can grow enrollment, expand our external partnerships, expand the presence in those communities in which we're serving, where we have locations. How are we doing all of these things in the spirit of leveraging the resources we currently have and being very mindful of how we're utilizing those resources? That means not asking to borrow more money. I don't have any issue with that. I think that is the smart way to operate the business that we're operating. We're an educational institution, but we're also needing to stay afloat. Start property evaluations. Again, this I think is already in the works. I've had a chance to visit all of our locations at this point, other than I think Carlinville. And so my first step is to take a snapshot look at what's happening, talk to those individual directors about what the vision is, how it's linked back to the campus, and then to begin looking at ways in which we can, refine, grow, and focus on opportunities in those locations. We've talked a little bit about this up front, but for the spirit of sharing it with the rest of the group joining, maintain our current buildings and divest of buildings that we're not using. Lincoln School sale. Nelson campus, is it needed? Does it serve the LC community? Are there ways the campus could be better used? Scott Bibb, again, just question, is it needed? Is it utilized well? Can it be sold? Could the Nelson College for Life be moved to Scott Bibb? The Brown Street homes and the East St. Louis project, should it be canceled? So these are, again, questions or points that have been brought up in terms of what we should start looking at as considerations. So, in the spirit and out of respect, we're obviously looking at everything. And I think that's going to take a collective energy and focus from all of us to always make sure that if we make a decision, whatever it is it in the best interest of the stakeholder? And the stakeholder is very much broad in our students, in our taxpayers, in our internal team members, in our external team members, etc. Personnel, and this has already started as well. Evaluate the organizational chart. One of the things I didn't point out up front is that board members did get copies of our organizational chart just as a reference. It's not something we're talking about today, but it's something that I wanted all of you to see. And it is something that we're beginning to look at broadly, but we're looking at it sort of in parallel with as we're reshaping the strategic plan. And as I said earlier, to be sure that we have the positions that are best aligned with the directions that we're moving in. Lower the number of VPs was something that was suggested we start doing. And I think that part of that discussion is taking a real hard look at the overall organizational structure. Where are there opportunities? Consolidate job descriptions to decrease costs. So that is, that's a tricky one. It's a matter of balance. I mean, we have to take a really hard look at what the roles and responsibilities of all of our team members are, and where absolutely there may be opportunities to refine and refocus. But the last thing, that any of us want to do is we're just going to eliminate positions because we have to. I want to make sure that any decision we make is thoughtful, meaningful, and everybody's voice has been contributing, has an opportunity to contribute to that decision. Because this is about people's lives, and we are about people, and we are about community building, and that also means our internal community. Is the policy of Lewis and Clark to allow 260 days of sick and leave accumulation? Is that too many, or is that a standard? And that's a policy and a practice that we have to look into. You know, I think I said this a little bit earlier, but as we evolve as an institution, this also means that our policies and practices have to evolve. And that is, you know, part of the role that the Human Resources Office plays, part of the role that the executive team plays in making sure that there's alignment between, you know, our advancement and growth as an institution and making sure our policies are up to date and that our policies make sense in supporting, you know, the work that we're doing. So that's one that we'll have to look into and see what that means and if there's any opportunity within that request. Support the effort to include performance reviews as an integral part of our compensation structure. You know, I think this is an interesting one to look at as well. It's one that I've looked at in previous lives as a leader. And it's something I think that we're all open to looking at, where you might have a baseline increase for the collective team, for example, a 1% increase, and then anything, say, between another 1% to 2% is based upon performance evaluation. And that could be a myriad of factors such as overall organizational performance. So, for example, if we refer to a key performance indicator that in 2022, we will grow enrollment 5%. And if we do meet or exceed that expectation, then the collective team gets that extra 1%. If we are below that, then we don't. I mean, these are systems that are not that common in education, but I think they need to become a factor in how we reward the team for performance. It's kind of an incentivized approach, and I have absolutely no issues with that. You know, I think it all keeps us on our toes as well, you know, to always push for better, always push for ways we can grow the institution, especially if there's some level of reward to it, right? So we started looking at this at my last position, and you know, there's a lot of pieces that go into it. So this is something that we would talk to with HR and maybe look at doing a little bit of research and then reporting as we would on many of these back to the board and saying, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're not seeing as it relates to your inquiry here in terms of what we should start doing. The next one relates to catering on campus. An interesting thing I learned as I've kind of been out and about is that we do over 1,000 events on campus on an annual basis, which I thought was pretty remarkable, just bringing people on our campus. And so this question was around catering. You know, is the Lewis and Clark catering profitable? Is Lewis and Clark catering needed? Is Lewis and Clark catering competing against businesses in the area? Should other businesses be allowed to cater on the Nelson campus? How much money are we receiving from Bella Milano? And where do we spend the money from Bella Milano? The one question I can answer there at this point is I believe 10% of the proceeds from Bella Milano go into our operating expenses for the college, and that ultimately helps cover operating expenses more broadly. So it's providing, you know, a revenue source to help offset operating costs. I don't know what that value is, but I know that's what happens there. And I do know that's a bid process, and Bella Milano wins that every year. But again, I think, you know, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but you know, I think part of this exercise is these are things that we look at. These are things that the expectation is that we evaluate the overall operational vitality of the institution. Where are there opportunities to be smarter or more focused in how we're investing in the institution? So that's something that can certainly be reported back to as well. Evaluating debt, is it possible to accelerate the debt repayment? Would there be a penalty if debt acceleration happened? And would a guideline be established? Should a guideline be established to limit debt? I think the average community college debt in the state of Illinois is right around $45 million. I mean, we're probably twice that amount. We're a larger college. You know, I don't think, and Mary and I have talked about this, and I've talked about this with others. Certainly debt is not a positive thing, but not all debt is negative. I think I am in alignment with, I think, all of the board that we do need to look at ways that we can possibly accelerate that debt, because this also leverages our ability to create other investment opportunities for the institution. So that's something that we are looking into. I know Mary is working very diligently behind the scenes in making this happen. I know that from last year to this year, kind of date to date, we're about $10 million less in debt than we were last year. So there's a lot of work already happening that is addressing that, but we also have to be practical in how we do that, so we're not taking away operating dollars that could be serving the interests of programs and services that we need on campus. So in other words, you know, it's kind of paying Peter, you know, or however that saying goes, sort of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, or whatever. I'm not good at those analogies. So kind of we're just moving money around, but we're limiting opportunity and access in some areas because we're pulling resources away. So it's a fine balance. And, you know, I think we're moving in the right direction there. And certainly it's a goal and expectation of mine is to control debt and to create less debt, but at the same time, continue to grow the college. This was an expectation as well, but to evaluate the dual credit program and to determine if it's negatively affecting enrollment. Through a high school partnership, you know, there's a chart that I have been able to take a look at and study quite a bit, but we have seen a decline in sort of our traditional enrollments and an incline in our high school partnerships, and it's coming to an intersect. And I think that's an issue because ultimately then one could argue we become sort of an extension of the high school rather than, you know, we being a college where we're offering college courses to high school students. So as I said, Yvette, myself, Brett, and others have already started to really get our arms around this and really look at how we can provide more deliberate leadership around the high school partnership model, potentially looking at framing this around an early college model where you have, you know, we have, you know, the early start program, we have dual enrollment, and we have dual credit. And now all those are kind of working together. New programs. And I think this goes back, I think when Kevin had asked the follow-up question on making sure that students are graduating and being able to get jobs, you know, new programs is a matter of evaluating current programs, feasibility of current programs, how are current programs performing. One of those performance indicators is the outcome, graduates getting jobs, and then also graduates sustaining those jobs. Status of the diesel program. I understand that with diesel program, this is again, I'm you know, sort of the data I'm seeing is we've invested we've gone for a number of grants to help support the diesel program. Recently, a $300,000 grant through the National Science Foundation, which is a really big deal. I know we've gotten a number of those in the past, but National Science Foundation is a great grant program to support, you know, to support career in tech. But this is to create partnerships, I believe, with Carlinville, Jerseyville, and one other Alton High School, or it might be Jerseyville and actually Alton, specifically around diesel. I think with Jerseyville, it's more around obviously tractors, combines, and then I think with Alton High School, it's with the bus and the liners, but to help create more access into the diesel program. That's a 3-year grant. I do know the diesel program's enrollments have gone from what I understand, the data I spoke about was getting feedback on today, from about 100 students in 2015 to about 50 students. So there's some opportunity there to really look at ways we can leverage that program and to be sure that students coming out of a diesel tech program are getting jobs. And so part of the NSF grant is to help leverage some of that. So in other words, we're bringing in some seed money that's going to allow us to hopefully explore some new opportunities there. The new ag tech training program, mechanics, fertilizer, chemical applicators program. I think this is an interesting opportunity for the college that actually could link back into diesel, could link back into welding, as there's an interconnectedness between those programs. One of the things that I think is really important for us to embrace when we look at growing enrollments is also to look at how some of the curriculum across programs like diesel tech, automotive tech, welding, all kind of underscore one another. And we can create stackable credentials, short-term certificates, competency-based education opportunities that pull in components of curriculum from across those programs to essentially create new pathways for students. So that's also something that we really have to take a look at. And that goes into the exploration of new programs, but also exploring new spin-offs of current programs. And I think that's already happening at some level. And that's, I think, what's happening when we go for sort of money through like National Science Foundation. Or oftentimes the ICCB will have some dollars that we're able to access that have limited or no match, by the way, which is important to help make that happen. So could the ag program become part of the diesel program? I think absolutely. It's kind of what I was getting to, is there could be, kind of a spin-off certificate. Therefore, it also saves time in that development continuum where we're not developing a whole new ag program, which could take a year or two, which requires a lot of economic, sort of economic analysis in terms of what are the jobs, what are the jobs that exist, that don't exist. So I think creating a pathway program off of a strong program, creates a quicker way for us to get to market and potentially a quicker way for us to build some enrollment. Cybersecurity program, I think we have opportunity there as well. I think IT is another one of those areas where, from what I understand, I know from past experiences, oftentimes students will get jobs after the first semester. So it kind of begs the question of, and it begs the bigger question that I often ask is, why does it need to take 2 years to earn a 2-year degree, right? I mean, why is it that if, respectfully, Julie and I are taking English 101 and Julie may need 4 weeks, but I may need 8 weeks, that we don't have the ability to move into our career, move on to that next step at a pace that meets our expectations? I think what's happening in programs like IT is that there's such a demand that students are able to move into those careers before they even finish. So what we need to be able to do is develop stackable credentials that are competency-based oriented to where students are earning and getting what they need to get to be able to get into those jobs. And I think back to Kevin's point is, then we're partners with those companies who are hiring our graduates. And then when they need training, guess who they're coming back to? They're circling right back to Lewis and Clark and saying, listen, my employee needs to earn these 3 certificates so they can get this promotion or work on this project or whatever it may be. And so that is the sort of circle of life, I guess you might call it, that we need to be thinking about as we look at growing the institution. And that goes to the point of status quo. I mean, we've always had a pretty strong IT program. We have graduates that come out of there, or in fact, students are getting jobs halfway through. So our graduate numbers are pretty low. So how do we refocus the program to meet the expectations of industry? I think collectively, and kind of bringing this one to a close, that is the approach we need to take for all of our programs. Is how are our programs aligned with what's happening in industry? Expand academic programs in NCREC. This is the only facility in the U.S. dedicated to studying these bodies of water. I think absolutely true. I think, the other part of this, and NCREC is now, I think, almost or pretty close to being self-sustainable. And that team there is very aggressively continuing to look for funding and ways of expanding their reach. But I'm going to be really open here. I feel that having an association with NCREC is a huge brand value add for Lewis and Clark, because we are probably in the top 1% of community colleges across the country when it comes to having an attachment to a research component, which I think can bring exposure to the college. Now, how that looks going forward, that's another question, but I would say that that's pretty impressive, in my opinion, and that I think we need to continue to look at ways that we are partnering with the work that NCREC is doing and how that helps our brand as Lewis and Clark also expand. So I think there's some real opportunity there. The next one on start doing is reaching out to the underserved populations, rural communities such as Greene County, urban Black communities such as Alton and East St. Louis. You know, again, this is where, you know, Scott Bibb comes in, right? This is where East St. Louis comes in. You know, we're in these communities. And so what I may argue is just abruptly pulling out of those communities is probably not the smartest move. The move I believe we should start doing is really asking ourselves, how can we be better connected with these communities via these facilities, or in the spirit of some of the suggestions that came earlier, or maybe there's other ways in which we're embedded in those communities, you know, whether it's through the facility or whether it's through renting or whether it's through the facility and, dare I say, maybe renting facilities because we need to be even more engaged. So I think that's where the opportunity is. Hey, we've been in these communities, we've been doing this. It's a status quo thing. It's kind of working, right? You know, maybe we could be doing a little bit better here and there. But how do we break away from that status quo and ask ourselves, is there a reset that needs to happen in some of these facilities? But I think, you know, even after the visit I had in East St. Louis the other day, that there's, I think, tremendous opportunity for us to have even a stronger presence there. But how that looks and feels and sounds is something we need to explore. And by the way, this is, you know, the points I'm making and the feedback that everyone has given is not about making conclusions. It's about starting the exploration process together of what makes the most sense to move forward. So I don't want to sort of be misleading with some of my comments, maybe that says I'm you know, I want us to be very open to everything that we're trying to get done. A stronger, more public effort to recruit minorities, especially African-American faculty, security, et cetera, who are visible to our students, prospects, and the public. Absolutely. Non-credit learners to learn what course offerings would appeal to these populations and in what format. So again, I think this one also circles back to exploring new programs and new services to be sure that we're continuing to broaden access at every level possible so that no student feels that they don't have the opportunity to be engaged with Lewis and Clark. And I also think part of that is how we're marketing to respective communities, you know, being more targeted, marketing what we feel is most relevant to specific communities, that may be most attractive to those communities is also important. Build relationships, closer cooperation and coordination with SWIC, SIUE. I know I've got some follow-up with SIUE. I've met with the chancellor of SIUC. You know, I think there's also opportunity in that one related to East St. Louis. I mean, there seems to be some turf battles going on there still, so we need to work on that. Local high schools have a rep on campus on a regular basis to answer student questions. I think phenomenal ideas there as well. Utilize our students for more work study, special projects. I think absolutely. And this is, I think, something that will come from even meeting more with students and getting involved more with really what the student perspective is and where we're missing opportunities with students. More open communication, more open communication between board and students. I will jump to a conclusion here and boldly say that I think it would be a really cool idea if we started a board student dinner on a semester basis where, you know, feedback, where the board had the direct opportunity to hear from students. So that would be by invitation. We would reach out to students, either through student government, through faculty, and invite them to join dinner with the board. It will be an open meeting, but students would have the opportunity to say, hey, you know, each board member could be sitting at a different table with a group of students, have an opportunity to have an open dialogue, and then that feedback is communicated orally at the end of the dinner, recorded, and then we use that as a gauge to take actions to address student needs and opportunities from the student's perspective. I think that could really start to kind of reset the cultural expectation of broader communication between board and students. A review of the athletic program. I think in the spirit of program evaluation, so we look at academic, I shouldn't differentiate academic and career and tech because they're all academic programs. So all of our academic programs, you know, having a review process, and we do have that process, but where that process may have some opportunity to bring more value to faculty, more value to community is, I think, important. We're also starting to think about how do department review processes look, or program review processes look in the spirit of like athletics. And that's already happening. I mean, I'm having discussions with coaches coming up very soon. I continue to have discussions with Sean. I've had discussions with the athletic director. And again, this is in the spirit of, hey, what's working, what's not working, where are there opportunities for us to continue to do the good work that we're doing. I never want to send a signal, because it's always a tricky one to talk about, that, oh, we're going to go out there and cut athletic programs. We're going to cut programs. I mean, there is a very mindful process that we have to participate in before any decision is made. And that's really, really important. I mean, really, really important, especially when it comes to here are things we need to start doing, and especially in the next category with here are things we need to stop doing. And then appropriate oversight over the East St. Louis Higher Education Center. So again, I think that goes back to the point of how are we looking at expanding and building on programs that we currently exist. And that program is through ICCB, and obviously there's grant associated with that. So no taxpayer dollars go to that program. So how we continue to move that program forward is a point of discussion. So I'm going to take a deep breath there, because I know I like to talk a lot, but that was a lot to kind of throw out there. I know all of you have seen this because it's been sent to you. But is there anything in the start category that is one that's kind of burning in your mind that you'd like to expand on, you'd like me to talk about a bit more? Because really the purpose here is to hear these and to begin to process, okay, what does this mean as we move forward? How do we start to really explore the feasibility of moving forward on some of this stuff? And I will say, before I give you the chance to actually respond to my question, is a lot of this work has already started. You know, as I planted seeds in questioning and asking the same questions to many of the team members already on campus, with faculty leadership, cabinet, extended cabinet, board members. We want to take a hard look at where we have the opportunity to build and grow, and where we may need to step back a little bit and reset. So thoughts, concerns, questions before we move on to the next one, which is stop. And there's not very many on that one, which is good. Okay. So the next category where I ask the questions are, what are the things from the board's perspective that we should stop doing? The first one on the list is housing scholarships. And so, again, you know, we have to evaluate that. I mean, that one also links back to athletics, you know, doing an evaluation of athletics. Everything is interconnected. You know, right now, I think from what I understand is, I think we're moving completely to Division II. And in Division II, that changes the expectations and structure of what we would need to do around scholarships. So I think even in part before I got here, there was some work being done to shift from Division 1 to Division 2. At the same time, there's a connectedness between scholarships and, us being able to recruit students from outside the region who then funnel into Trailblazer Commons, which is not part of the college, but essentially, I think part of the identity of the college in the sense that if a student wants to come to Lewis and Clark Community College from outside the area, there is a safe and convenient place for them to live. And from what I understand, housing scholarships have been a integral part of the support system for Trailblazer Commons. So there's a lot of pieces there. It's like all these tentacles coming out of that housing scholarship one, but that's one that we're evaluating. That's one that we're going to take a hard look at everything. And I don't mean that to be a signal in any way what we're going to do or not do, but that's a loaded one. And we have to really think hard about the housing scholarships topic. I mean, does anyone, I'll ask after each one on this one, since it's a shorter list, but obviously since stopping stuff can be a bit more painful. Do any board members want to dig into that one a little bit more? What your thinking is around that one? Why? Maybe if I dare ask the question, why is that one that's concerning? And then go from there. Because I think that would help me in understanding where you're coming from, if you feel comfortable doing so.
I could start on that. I've looked at that expenditure for as long as I've been on the board, for about 3 years. That's always concerned me. It's a really large number, and I was concerned about that housing built when it was. I thought, why is that being built? Why do we drive through the campus to get to that building? That seems like that would be a liability to this college. Why isn't there a street that Godfrey has straight to that apartment, and you don't drive through the campus to get to that apartment? But housing scholarships, a large sum of money. And it seems to me that we could utilize that money better in other ways. Whether it's spending on IT programs that we need to update, and that we'll need to spend more and more money on those IT programs because they change every day and every year. And I think it's important for the college to stay on top of the IT programs. That's education. Got to be on top of it. And somebody wants to go get a job. What program did you use? Oh, I used a program that was designed 10 years ago. Sorry, we can't use you. I just think we need to be current on that. And I think that money could be better spent on the student body, in IT especially. That's my thought.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Well, I didn't submit that as one of my stops, but it's just something that surprised me when I first came on the board that we were doing that. I just never thought of a community college being a place where you live and they pay for your housing. I agree it's a tough one to evaluate because it's a value you can't really put your finger on dollar-wise. What do you get back from that? And you could say there's a handful of kids that won't come to the college unless they have this. You could kind of say that's what you're getting, but I don't know. I guess I think it's an intriguing one because, like I said, when I first came here, I had no idea that was going on. And I guess community colleges generally, I feel, aren't known for their athletic programs. Not to saying they aren't valuable, but I think it warrants looking at. And I don't like seeing that dollar amount on the financial statements either, but maybe it's worth it. I don't know. So.
Okay.
I would like to see it, a comparison or a benchmark against our peers in the community college area. And then to try to evaluate what value does it bring to our students? Are our students appreciative of the athletic program, or does it generate a sense of pride? And so is it of a value to our students that way, or to the rest of the community? Is our community participating? Do they enjoy the community college sports? So it's just, what's the value proposition?
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that they're intrinsically tied to each other. You can still have a really good athletic program, but maybe the students don't live in a building on campus. I don't remember where the article came from. I think it was through our trustee emails that we get about, I think it was Parkland College and their baseball program, and it featured 3 baseball players that ended up playing in the major leagues. And so, I mean, right there, that added value to that community college. And I'm sure after that happened, there are lots of students that are going to that community college to play baseball because they're known for their baseball program. So there's no reason that we can't be that in some of these sports. But I guess the question is, do we need to pay to have the kids live here? That's what I'm wondering about. And I'm not questioning whether we should have good athletic programs and premier ones, and especially ones that give kids the opportunity to move on to the next level. Maybe they can't jump right into a U of I program or SIUE or whatever, but they can start at community college and move up from there. So I think we should disjoin this in that, we're not really questioning the value of the athletic programs. We're questioning whether it's if we should be paying for students to live. That's the way I would look at it if it were.
Okay.
Dr. Kraska, did Stewart have a athletic campus housing?
Yeah, and to Julie's point, if I were to say, hey, we're going to cut a sport, I would have been run out of town. I mean, athletics was a extremely important part of the identity of the college, and quite frankly, it is in a lot of community colleges. I mean, women's basketball, women's volleyball, and men's basketball would, particularly women's volleyball, there's only women's volleyball, and basketball would draw 1,000 people to a game, like every home game. And buses would go, and they were national tournament level, and scholarships was always an issue. I mean, we had dorms on campus there, so it was a little bit of a different structure. They were part of the campus, but athletes made up probably 60% of the filled 60% of the beds. And the only programs that really brought in revenue were tennis. We had about 85 to 100 international students on campus, much smaller campus than Lewis and Clark. And all those were typically athletes, and a lot of them paid their own way. So the way I approached it was I looked at the staffing. So we started to, right before I left, and then I left, right? Sort of everything blew up, then I left, right? With rather than assistant coaches, we changed the role of assistant coaches, and it saved the college by about $400,000. It's something I've been wanting to do for a couple of years, but it had to get some of our major boosters on the same playing field. I mean, because there was a sense of, just a sense of pride. I mean, you just, yeah. So yes, Dwight. I mean, and so here, I think you got to have finesse with this stuff. I mean, it's not about just cutting stuff. I think we have to look hard at what I think, Kevin, you said it. I mean, what is the value add, right? I mean, what is the sense of connection back to athletics that the community has? I think it adds a nice part of, the college experience. I mean, having athletics and, being able to go out to a ball game. And, but I have yet to experience that here, obviously, because the environment we're in now is kind of limiting that. But, I'm trying to get my arms around what that looks like in a normal year. And, do community members kind of come out on a Saturday afternoon to watch the soccer team, or on a Thursday night to watch the basketball game, and there's just energy and people love it and they look forward to it. It's kind of like high school football, right? Everyone, it's like, oh yeah, it's the game. But even if that happens, are there ways in which we can refocus, restructure, rethink how we do it, but still maintain that operation? I think, there's always a way to make things better, to refine things. I really believe that there's always a path to making it better, and trying to satisfy the stakeholder at every level. And we're never going to make everybody happy all the time. I think the trick is never to make everybody upset all at the same time, right? I mean, you've got to have a balance with that. But just say, hey, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And, and then do it. But I think too, every state's going to be a little different. Back to your point, Dwight. I mean, yeah. And I mean, the point too for me, it comes back to access. I mean, does this provide students an opportunity to move into a D1 program, to transfer to a four-year college? Does it provide a student the opportunity they wouldn't have had if they didn't have the pathway through athletics? I mean, this is a piece too that's fundamental to our mission. So in other words, kind of back to my very initial point, does athletics offer another pathway to access education, that if we limited that, we would limit access to that population of student? Because if they don't come here, they're going to go somewhere. They're going to go somewhere else that provides them that opportunity. And the matter of the question is do we want that to happen? I mean, is it worth the investment? I don't want to use the word cost. I mean, I think, cost to me is transactional. I think the investments we're making, are they smart investments? Do we feel that the ROI, even though it may be difficult at times, put our finger on it because it's nebulous, right? I mean, we've got students coming to Lewis and Clark, not from the area. They're getting a housing scholarship. They're living on campus, but they're bringing a value back to the community that we have to measure, that also lends a certain aspect of the campus identity, campus pride, campus culture, that if we didn't have that, would it limit other people coming to Lewis and Clark? Because they may say, I want to go to a college that has athletics. I want to go to a college where on a Saturday afternoon, I can go to a ball game, or I can kind of have that vibe. I mean, sometimes, it's impossible to measure vibe, like the quality, like, I think it's, and that's something maybe we ask students. I mean, I'm working on a survey now for students to ask very similar questions as I mentioned up front. And that may very well be a question, in terms of what gives you a sense of pride as a student. Is it athletics? Is it programming? Is it extracurricular activities? Is it student clubs? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. So it's a loaded question. Maybe that's a loaded answer. I don't know, but it's and by the way, it doesn't all come down to scholarships, because I think the point was very well made that we don't need scholarships to have athletics. You know what I mean? I mean, it helps, but athletics may very well still be a very important part of Lewis and Clark's identity as a community college, in providing access points for students that just want an opportunity to play a sport while being educated, and then opening up a door for them to another college or another opportunity. Because I also think it can broaden our access as well. So stop. Yeah, I'll stop. I'll just mute myself. So.
A case in point, you all heard Jason Iserhausen, pitcher for the Cardinals,
Yep.
Cardinal Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
Went to Lewis and Clark College, and when he come to Lewis and Clark, he wasn't a pitcher. He was an third baseman, and the Lewis and Clark College coach got him to pitching, and now he's in the Cardinal Hall of Fame. So, you know, you never know what it's going to bring back when you have a good athletic program.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Well,
it's very true.
I was gonna give the example of a family I know too. I go to church with that. Their daughter came here to play a sport, and she's an okay athlete. You know, probably couldn't have played anywhere else, but that being able to stay close to home and play a sport. I think she actually lives on campus, but it's not paid for. They paid for it, but the athletic piece was like the final piece that kind of gave them the sense that there would be she'd have an overall experience here and would enhance her experience at a 2-year college. So I think there's some benefit there, but you know, to me, again, it goes back to the question, do we have to pay for it? You know, or can the families pay for it? You know, I don't know.
And one of the thoughts I had, and again, like I said, I mean, the discussion today is not to come up with solutions, but I think, you know, this is worthy. You know, I think one idea that we could explore is, and I know we don't have it here, is a booster club, you know, which could really, and I can tell you, at a booster club at Seward, and they helped fund a lot. But it had been around a long time, and obviously I was involved in that. And, if we look at the future of Lewis and Clark Community College athletics, for example, how could a booster club, setting up and establishing you need some supporters around that, help offset potential scholarships, operational costs for athletics. So there can be a finer balance where there's more of that buy-in from the community, which is then carried forward to allowing us to continue something that really brings a value add to the institution. So, that's something that I've got on my radar that I want to look into to support the opportunity that I think is in front of us to sustain athletics, but do it in maybe a little bit of a different way. So.
Maybe like the Isringhausen Baseball Booster Club.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I've been, some students that had come to me and said, I don't go to junior college to go to an athletic event. I go there to get an education, and so I started attending some of the athletic events, and they're not well attended by students and certainly not the general public. I was shocked, and that the attendance of people watching the games were, it was just insignificant. And and I'm happy we had a person go professional, but 1 in 50 years isn't exactly record setting. But I'm happy he went through Lewis and Clark, but I don't know, does he contribute money to us, or do we have fundraisers using, which might be an idea, invite him back and let's have a fundraiser or start an athletic booster club or something like that, because he does certainly have name recognition. So, there are a lot of things, like you said, Dr. Traskis, to think about, what we're doing and how we're going forward.
Yeah, I think part of it too is, to everyone's point, is do we build upon the culture of athletics? An idea kind of thrown around as a Hall of Fame, right? Going out and reaching out to former players, whether they've gone pro or not, and it's kind of, where are they now? It's also a way to engage alumni and to bring alumni and connect them back to the campus and their experience they had here. Which I think could be powerful, and that could also be utilized as a fundraising opportunity to also, I think, grow this culture of philanthropy at the college, which over time can really help us sustain some of these pieces from I don't know even how to put this, where to some people it doesn't matter, but to other people it really does. And then you have to find that happy balance in between. And maybe always err on the side of, if it broadens access and allows us to bring an additional value add to us, maybe giving us a a competitive advantage over the next community college or college where a student may go, you know, I'm like, hey, let's stay in the game as long as it's sustainable from a financial perspective. So that's where booster clubs or other fundraising opportunities related to athletics may become more of a central part of our culture. But again, not about solutions today, more about, hey, here's what we're hearing. Let's start to think about strategy moving forward. Another stop one was stop allowing the board to manage the college. Okay, so, you know, I think in the expectations piece, it was pretty clear that, at least from my perspective, the board and I are on the same page with working together to advance the college, and that you expect me to run the college. And I expect you to expect me to run the college and to let me run the college and to let me make decisions within my, you know, my authority. And when I have questions or concerns, you better believe I'm going to bring them to you, because I'm going to need your guidance as much as at times I think you're going to need mine. So I'll check that one off. Stop the deterioration of our historic structures. Can't agree more. And as I mentioned, I think on Tuesday night at the board meeting, trying to kind of get our arms around this $37.5 million that apparently has been earmarked for Lewis and Clark for the Commons. But I think that's what that point was getting at, that we really need to think of ways in which we're going to be able to maintain the integrity of some of these historic structures before we get too far behind the 8 ball where it's going to get more and more expensive to maintain them. So that's something on the radar. And I think the other part of that too, which I don't think came up, was deferred maintenance of really, I think Chris brought this up in Tuesday's meeting, but really trying to get our arms around where we're at with deferred maintenance, because in past lives doing this work, deferred maintenance can sometimes come up behind you and scare you, and then sort of eclipse the bigger strategy of what you're trying to get done, because something needs fixing and it could have lasted longer if it would have been maintained. So I think we need to take a look at that, and that's something that I plan to bring to the board as well.
I think once you get a handle on whether we're getting that money sooner rather than later,
Yeah.
if it's not in sight, I think we should consider maybe putting some new carpet in that building, or painting or something, especially in the public areas that every student that comes on campus sees. I don't think, you know, unless we're going to demolish the building next year, I just don't, I think we need to spruce it up right away just a little.
Yes.
Rather than waiting another 5 years or whatever for this money. It looks bad in the inside. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree with you, Julie. Good point, well taken.
Yeah, because once that money, we may be announced for it, there's still quite a long time for process. You know, I think we can do some back end work, architects and et cetera. So there's going to be some planning to be done there, but I would agree 100%. The next point was stop holding meetings via Zoom only, try to get meetings back open to the general public and letting more people engage in college activities. I think that's something the college exec team is planning to explore at our late October retreat. We were actually planning to do a retreat this week as well, but schedules are what they are. And, you know, so we'll explore that. And obviously knowing what we know now and trying to keep everybody safe and being as reasonable as we can, we're going to try to find a happy balance there. But I think that's something that we're all exploring, but we want to be practical and we want to respect everybody in this one and look out for the bigger picture. So I don't know how else to dig into that one, but absolutely. Stop investing in expensive new buildings. Okay. I don't think that's on the horizon, at least for me. I mean, we're looking more at resetting and refocusing. Incurring debt, absolutely. not on my agenda as president. Spending time and money on efforts that do not educate the students of our district directly. I think that goes back to the broader discussion we had earlier on expectations and some of the things we need to start doing or start looking at in terms of services and programs and kind of recentering some of that. So I feel those dots will all kind of be connected eventually in terms of what we're going to be doing, what we're not going to be doing, or how we may be building upon what we're doing and maybe pulling back on some other things. That's the last stop. We're doing pretty good with time. So are there any questions on the stops beyond what we've discussed so far? I think that was good. Good stuff on there. Okay.
Well, I want to congratulate you on hitting on all these topics. It's, you know, like you said, no decisions were to be made, but it gives an opportunity for everyone to hear your thoughts and hear some of our thoughts. And I thought it was a good exchange. And again, it's ideas and it sounds to me like you're in control of this and you have committees working on it and evaluating. So recommendations can be brought back to the board. So I thank you for what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I thought it's a good exercise too. I thought it was kind of like an organized brainstorm.
Yep.
Good idea.
So let me walk through the continues. And then my last question, but I'll ask it now. So have I aged in 1 month? I mean, you know, how's it going? All right, so continue doing. So these are things as a board that you really felt strongly about that we should continue doing. You know, I imagine from your perspective, you feel these are good things. Using research to determine the success of new practices. You know, I think that's absolutely an interesting one, looking at, you know, how we're doing what we're doing. Are there ways to improve it and continue to build on that? Working with student groups to learn what services would enhance their experiences. And this goes, I think, to what kind of planning right now is getting out a survey to students. Having met with students, I mean, I kind of pride myself on really being engaged in as many student groups as I can, keeping my finger on the pulse of what's happening with our students and being able to respond to those, you know, mobilizing the teams around me to be able to say, hey, listen, I've heard this 14 times from different students. What can we do to help make this better? And I'll give you a great example that's come up from faculty, that's come up with students to me already in the first, you know, month or so is advising and assessment, the assessment hours that we offer. And as of yesterday, we're going to be expanding assessment hours. And this was feedback directly from students and faculty. And this is about access. You know, I'm like, listen, if anything we need to do, because, you know, we can't see everything as a single person. We need the teams around us, the individuals around us to help us keep the fingers on the pulse of things. But I was starting to hear this directly. And so we are going to be looking at making those changes to be able to help our students have a better experience. And I think we need to continue doing that. So I was really happy to see that. Being as student focused as possible and keeping people safe while also listening to everyone's concerns during these uncertain times. And I think, you know, I really think that goes back to the kind of the balance between that stop one of the Zoom meetings, but then also respecting everyone's kind of point where they're at. So maybe a balance there is, you know, we always give the option of joining a meeting via Zoom. You know, it's kind of what we're trying to get to with this blend flex model of, you know, up to maybe 6 or 7 students can meet in person, but there's also a synchronous component to a class where you can also join that class live and in person, but via Zoom. And if you're in person in 1 week, you're like, hey, listen, I feel more comfortable joining Zoom. You can still join that class on Wednesday afternoon, same time, same place, you're just on Zoom. So we're trying to find ways in which we can provide some agility while respecting everybody's concerns and boundaries around what's happening. Writing grants to support promising ideas, absolutely. Already there's been some thought, again, not about solutions, but already been some thought around how do we have a more centralized and focused strategy around grant development, grant management, and the ultimate implementation of the dollars when they're here. So that's an organizational structure discussion, but one that I think has been kind of a common bit of feedback that I've gotten from every group. Researching the viability of academic programs, support services, athletics, etc., which, you know, absolutely is happening. That one also fell into the category of start doing as well. So that was good to see on both ends there. Complete the report, complete and report on the labor market analysis that was referred to in the spring 2019 Discover. And that's one that I actually had a point on. What if there was any other feedback on that one, or perhaps?
Yeah, that was my continue, and I had to go back to that to Discover, and if I can find the article, and maybe it was, maybe it was a spurious article, I don't know, but they referred to a labor analysis study, and then
Okay.
we never heard anything about it.
Okay, interesting. It's okay.
I would think that that's something that's, I mean, either is ongoing or is done once a year or every other year, something like that.
Okay. Thanks. The good exposure in the media.
Part
Yes.
of that analysis would be your meeting with the various industry people as to what their needs are, and if we're meeting them, and if not, you know, what can we do to meet those needs? I don't know whether, if you don't have time to go to all of them, whether we have a list of the various employers in the community, and maybe we can send out a questionnaire from the college to them. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but just throwing out ideas here.
Nope, that's good.
Yeah, I think very high on your priority list should be making contact with someone at the refinery.
Yeah.
They represent a very large portion of our property tax revenue.
Yeah. I'll put that on there, yeah. I think it's on the radar. I'll ask Sue, but yeah, absolutely. The good exposure in the media, I think that's important. I think as we broaden, yeah, Sue just messaged me saying it's on the list. So we're yeah, you know.
I think somebody's doing a really good job there. I see Lewis and Clark on every newspaper that I get. And I don't get them all now. I used to get about 6 or 7 newspapers.
Yep. And yeah, and I met with Laura yesterday about our Interact marketing group and some of the strategies that I've been thinking about with marketing and media and getting the narrative out there about the college. And that's something that we're going to not only continue doing, but I think really expand on and be more focused on, and quite frankly, really want to celebrate the good work that we're doing and highlight the good work and highlight the partnerships, you know, in more broad ways, I guess, so to speak. So, hey, look at that. Welcome to the meeting.
Future Blazer there, huh?
Oh, there you go. Future leaders right there. That's awesome. I love it. Meeting and expanding relationships with community leaders. Absolutely. I mean, that's for me, it's just what I do, and look forward to continuing to do that. Yeah, using NGREC as a world-class facility and to draw attention to LC as more than a community college. I really agree with that one. I feel we have tremendous opportunity there. I mean, I just really do. I think part of that and what I'm challenging the leadership team there with already is, how do we expand this? How do we create those more deliberate pathways into programs and into services of Lewis and Clark? So from any stakeholder perspective, there is an actual relevance, an actual value add back, where it's not sort of this extension that really is loosely coupled back to the core focus of the college. I think there's opportunity there.
Ken, I'd like to comment on that. I had a faculty member there at Lewis and Clark comment to me about NGREC and said that, you know, they're doing a good job, but they need to step it up You know, if they can get better research and publish more papers, you know, either nationally or internationally to make, because that is a world-class operation there if we get the world-class people in there. And so, you know, maybe you could share that, you know, with Gary, and I'm sure that's on his chart too, but that's just a comment from one of the faculty members there at Lewis and Clark. And I tended to agree with that. You know, the more national publication of research done there, the better off it'll be and our connection with it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful, actually. Thank you. Employ people who are dedicated and care about the college. I don't think any of us would have it any other way. I think we're off to a really good start and we'll continue doing that. And then meeting the education needs of our district. You know, we do this now, but I feel we are way too slow at changing and implementing new programs. I think this one circles back to one on the start list of really looking at programs, you know, new programs, you know, program feasibility and potential kind of process of how do we go from idea to implementation in a shorter, more succinct way. I think part of that is looking at how we can grow upon programs we already have. This kind of cuts through the bureaucracy of taking a year or two to bring a new program to market, when in fact, in that time frame, the relevance of that program may be reduced. So there's some work that needs to happen there, but I am all in on that one. So that's all I had on the continue list. I think, you know, what I'll do next is I'll ask, are there any questions or any additional concerns or thoughts that any board member has based on what we've spoken about at this point? And then if not, I'll make a couple of final comments. But Kevin, I saw your hand go up, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer some piece of information that I've received on the diesel tech program. And that is that there are companies out there right now that are recruiting auto tech people to come in and learn diesel tech, and they'll pay them and they'll pay their education. So we are behind. If that's true, what I heard, if that's true, we're kind of falling behind, aren't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Do you know which companies those are? Or this is just, hey, there are companies out there doing this kind of thing. Good.
I don't remember whether they were quoted any specific companies or not, and I can't even remember exactly where I heard that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Okay. So if not, I'll.
Dr. Trask,
Yes, sir.
deal a lot with the diesel industry, and the tractor dealerships, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Freightliner, they tell me that it's harder to find a diesel mechanic than it is a truck driver, and it's almost impossible to find a truck driver right now. Diesel mechanics are harder than find the truck drivers. So there was a school over in O'Fallon, Missouri, that Peterbilt was actually sending some of their trade-in trucks to get worked on because they don't have enough of their own people. So it's a demand. We need to get into that market quick.
And I understand we've had some conversations with, because Peterbilt's out in Decatur, correct? Am I right on that one, or is it Decatur?
There's the Peterbilt dealer in this area is called the Larson Group, and they're owned by the Larson family, and they've got like 20 some odd dealerships around the country. Their headquarters is in O'Fallon, Missouri. They do have a place in Sauget, Illinois. Okay. And I know the owner real well.
Okay. Okay.
And we also deal with Freightliner over Troy too.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for that. So I guess I'll move to the next item, which is just kind of some closing comments, and looks like we'll beat the clock here. And the closing comments are more around timeline. And so just to give the board a sense of kind of where I'm at in my mind, and sort of what I've created as an expectation for myself coming in, is by the spring, and right now, you know, I'm looking at somewhere between February, March, maybe the April board meeting. I would like to be in, and by the way, along this continuum, the board will have seen drafts and will obviously be solicited feedback. I'd like to bring to the board a reimagined and refocused strategic plan for your adoption. And prior to all of that happening, I will be incorporating feedback from all of our stakeholders, you know, internal and external. So internal, I define internal by all of our team, our students. External, you know, community leaders, general public. And the way I plan to do that is actually through some marketing and working through media services to get those surveys out there. And they're very, I'm already developing these. They're short, sweet, to the point, but really seeking feedback from the community to help inform us as a community college on what we need to be doing to better serve them. And then pulling all this together and then ultimately developing directions and very clear measurable goals / aspirations. I kind of play between those words that are grounded in some benchmarks so that we have essentially the beginnings of a dashboard to say, here is where we're going. Here's where we're driving. And at any point, we know how we're performing across those key directions. So again, timeline, somewhere between February and April. It's just all going to depend on feedback and other things that come up. And I like to give myself a little bit of a framework there, or a little bit of a time frame to do that in. You know, while all this is happening, obviously, you know, I'm going to continue to be meeting with external stakeholders, with legislators, and being engaged and involved in every level I possibly can. The tricky part in doing all this is at times, you know, the cart will be put before the horse, so to speak, because we will need to make decisions. We will need to be looking at things that we need to make decisions around that from a sort of strategic thinker perspective, it's like, okay, well, I want decisions to be relevant to the strategic directions we're moving in. I don't want us to make decisions just because we need to make some decisions. So, you know, part of me saying that is really, you know, requesting the patience of the process, you know, that it will take time. It doesn't mean decisions won't be made. And, you know, I mean, all of this is going to be happening sort of simultaneously. Well, all this is happening, we're also going to be evaluating very hard the organizational structure to be sure that as the feedback comes in and as the strategic plan is taking shape, that our organizational structure is in line and our budget planning is in line with what we're trying to get done. My plan is to have a 3-year strategic plan, not a 5-year. You know, I think 3-year is more reasonable in my opinion. You know, and then at about the 2-year period, we're beginning to plan for the next 3-year cycle. Kind of that's where I'm at. So today's exercise and retreat was really to help us begin to inform that process. And I want to thank each of you very personally for really taking this seriously, which I knew you were going to do, but just, you know, and I mean that in the sense that you put the time in, you reflected, and you offered your perspective in how we can continue to make Lewis and Clark better. And for me, that is the most rewarding part of this work. So to have all of you on the team, to have all of you collectively focused on what's in the best interest and the better interest of our students is why we're all here. So I thank you. And with that, I will conclude my comments and just wish each of you healthy and just wonderful weekend. You know, be safe, have some fun, enjoy this beautiful weather. And just again, thank you so much for your support, your confidence in me, and really allowing me to help move the institution forward in good ways. So thank you all very much. I will turn it over, I think, back over to Chairman Hyen, where I think we have to
Adjourn.
adjourn, right? So You have the honor of adjourning the meeting, sir. But thank you, everyone, very much. And thank you as well to everyone who joined us today. I appreciate you listening in and for your interest and curiosity into how we look at moving the institution forward. So thank you all.
Before we close it out, Dennis, did you have anything to add to us? The meeting?
No, not at this time. I thought that was a thorough kind of overlook at what everyone's responsibilities should be, and a lot of things to think about as everybody kind of plans to move forward with the college. So I think we had a pretty good discussion, and I was able to sit here and listen to all of it. And I think we probably should do more of these.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dennis, as well.
Any other comments? Dwight, Kevin, Chuck, Julie, Bob?
I just feel like it's been an excellent experience here, and it's going to be helpful in the growth of Lewis and Clark College and more professionalism, I do believe. So that's just about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I agree. Thanks for doing it. And it's been a good starting point for all of us, and we'll grow and go on from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Okay.
There's no opposition? Oh, Dwight, you want to say, did you want to say something, Dwight?
No, you're between me and a deer stand.
Oh, I understand
Well,
where
thank you,
you're
everyone,
coming
so
from.
much.
I
Have a
understand.
great weekend.
Get going.
Good luck, Dwight.
If there's no opposition,
And
we
we'll
stand
see everyone
adjourned.
soon. Thank you, everyone.
We're
So
looking
long.
forward for the deer jerky that you're going to make and share with us, Dwight.
One thing
Okay.
we need